Vince has lost his damn mind.
Well, tell that to Fox and USA.
Sorry, there's no place for that in wrestling.
This is what pro wrestling is in 2020.
I'm a fan of old school wrestling, not this sports entertainment.
I just want pro wrestling to also be entertaining. I'm Mark.
I'm Rusty.
And this is Point Counterpoint. Hello and welcome to another edition of Point Counterpoint. I am Mark Lindsay, aka GotMark76. We thank you for tuning in. Please, you're watching this video now. Hit that subscribe button. That way you'll be the first to catch each and every episode of Point Counterpoint. I am joined by my tag team partner, Rowdy Rusty Loudermilk. Rusty, how are you today?
I am doing fabulous here at the Pittsburgh version of the Point Counterpoint Studios. And let's have some fun, man. Let's talk some wrestling, if you will, baby.
If you will, brother. Well, we are going to start off with a topic that I am very passionate about, and that is AEW. You know, AEW started last year. Their TV began in October, and one of the hits, in my opinion, for AEW is the development of new stars. Darby Allin is a guy that I never heard of prior to AEW, and he's really making the best of it. He is a young talent that I enjoy watching each and every week. MJF is one of the greatest heels in the business right now, and he is somebody that if you follow on social media, you just can't help but laugh out loud. Jungle Boy is another hit on AEW. A real-life story developing in front of our eyes as he is the son of former actor and who unfortunately passed away last year, Luke Perry. And that's like a feel-good story that happens in front of us. And Jim Ross mentions Jungle Jim Perry every single week on Dynamite. Britt Baker, who was the girlfriend of NXT champion Adam Cole and is doing everything she can to get out of Adam Cole's shadow by becoming a major force in the women's division for AEW. And of course, the number one contender to the AEW Women's Championship, Hikaru Shida. Rusty, what do you think is something that AEW is really hitting on in their development?
Well, before I say something new, let me go back and hit on some of the points that you did. Darby Allin, I saw him in a documentary that was on Evolve, if you've ever heard of Evolve Wrestling. It's a promotion by Gabe Sapolsky, who used to be the booker for Ring of Honor many years ago.
Studied under Paul Heyman.
Yes, indeed. Long story short. And so that's where I first became a Darby Allin fan, but it seems like when they got Darby Allin over there at AEW and he got on a larger scale, he just exploded. So yeah, Darby Allin is a star, and if they don't get too caught up in pushing only their friends and push who they need to push, I would see Darby Allin becoming a champion sometime down the road. He's one of the future stars of AEW. I too like Jack Perry. He seems to be an exciting kid, and he doesn't do too many high spots. So I think the future is bright for him as well. You're right about Britt Baker. I've always been a Britt Baker fan, but as I said on my show Breakout a few weeks back, I don't know that I like her heel persona. What say you, Mark?
I think the heel persona is what's getting her over to the audience. I don't think she was getting over as a face, and I actually like her heel persona. So there's our first counterpoint, Rusty.
Yes, indeed. I mean, in my opinion, she may develop into a good, I'm having a hard time figuring out what's her heel persona and what's just one of those bad skits.
Her heel persona is stuck up snob. If you watch her with Tony Schiavone with the Starbucks coffee, skit that they had where she was calling some girl Reba, and her name was Rebel, and it was just she just seems like she doesn't care. She's so cocky and arrogant. Yeah, and that is that's the heel booking 101 is going to cockiness and arrogance to get over as a bad guy. So she's doing it very well, and again, she's using social media and she's using the YouTube channels of the other wrestlers to get her story and her character over.
Sure. And as you may remember, I am and let me say it here for the viewers that have just came into episode number 2. Hello, Gene Ligon, by the way, if you're out there, but others as well. Hello, everybody. Thank you for supporting the show, everybody. But for those that just came and don't know this, I'm a huge MJF fan. And MJF, the tapings for MLW, Major League Wrestling, were so far behind that MJF just finished up about 3 weeks ago on their tapings, even though he was already in AEW. So I got a chance to see some of MJF's old stuff. And MJF kind of has that Roddy Piper type heel persona going on. And I tell you, if he can stay away from the demons of this business and the demons of pro wrestling and not go down the drug abuse and the Alberto El Patron areas of getting in trouble with women and all that, MJF will be a star. The only question is, can AEW lock him up long term and keep him within the company? Because I guarantee you, somebody over there at Titan Tower is watching AEW, and even they can see, even those brain trust over there can see, AEW has a star in MJF. So hopefully Tony Khan will lock MJ up for years to come, because I don't want to see MJF anywhere but AEW.
Well, we're going to stick with MJF on my miss.
Okay.
And one of my misses for AEW has been the way that certain feuds has kind of fizzled out. You know, Cody Rhodes challenged Chris Jericho for the AEW championship back in November and lost that match because MJF threw in the towel. And they built up MJF versus Cody for the next several months. They had their match at pay-per-view at Revolution in February, which was kind of an underwhelming performance between the two, but the match was still decent. MJF snuck out a victory, and the very next Wednesday, or 3 days later, Cody's in the ring to address it, and that's when Jake Roberts comes out to start the feud with Lance Archer. It just kind of seems that all these feuds had these great buildups, kind of just fizzle away.
Yes.
What do you think about that, Rusty?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to walk on you there. I just said it. You might not have heard it. I said rushed. It seems like they're trying to rush somebody else into another program with somebody else, whether it be MJF or anybody else, rather than let these feuds have what we call a slow burn and basically milk as much as you can out of them. So I agree with you 100%. I would have liked to have seen Cody and MJF go on a little longer, even if that meant that you had to put Lance Archer into a beginning feud with somebody else. But again, that's playing Monday morning quarterback. One of the things, while we're on the misses of AEW there, let me take you back a little bit further. A few months back, the Horseman, one of the original Four Horsemen, Tully Blanchard, was managing Shawn Spears, the former Ty Dillinger of WWE. And they do an angle where they tie Tully to the chair. And Tully's never seen from again. Now, you can say, well, it's because of COVID-19 and blah, 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 blah. But they've just dropped that whole thing. Why isn't Shawn Spears pissed at Cody for tying his manager, Tully Blanchard, to the chair?
That was actually, I believe that was Joey Janela that did that. I think they had kind of covered that.
Yes.
But it wasn't really, like you said, it wasn't a great, they kind of just threw that out there. It wasn't a major follow-up.
Yeah, but see, to your point, no matter who it was, whether I was wrong on the name or what, to your point, they start these things and then they go, okay, another idea, so let's do this, and they don't really follow through. So I hope that in the future they can follow through, because as the company goes on and continues to prosper, they're going to run out of ideas that quick when you just do something for a few weeks and drop it, move on, drop it, move on, drop it, move on. And maybe it's not supposed to be for people like us to remember stuff like that. But I think there's more than just us that are complaining about it. I would like to see them stretch it out a little bit more. It doesn't mean you have to have a program for 6 months, but you need to at least do it for longer than they've been doing it now, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
The next topic is COVID-19 and the coronavirus stuff that's going around any promotion, whether it's AEW, WWE, ROH, NWA, all of them have been hit hard by the COVID-19 situation, especially those wrestlers that are not under exclusive contracts that might work different promotions. Well, now they can't work for anybody. So I think we've got to get past this COVID-19 thing and get the world back to normal function, not only for the real world, but for the wrestling world, so that those wrestlers that don't have an exclusive contract with somebody can get paid. Because, some out there I heard are having to take regular jobs, which will teach them a lesson, I think, but others may not have the skills to take regular jobs and things like that too. So I'm hoping that this COVID-19 goes away, never to come back for anybody, because it certainly has put a hurt on professional wrestling in general. And I think, Mark, you may agree. I'd like to have your thoughts on this. What do you think about my point where I would say this, that the empty arena shows, or the shows that AEW had where they just have like most of the rest of the locker room out there as a makeshift audience, it just doesn't have that same big time watch this show tonight feel that a regular AEW Dynamite or even a Raw would have, assuming anybody's watching Raw in the first place.
Well, there's 2 points I would make on that. Number one, AEW having the wrestlers and some of these production staff in the audience kind of reminds me of the old school NWA Techwood Drive Studios, where they would have like some fans in a small arena. So I kind of like the aspect of it from there. One thing that really boggles my mind is why AEW acknowledges COVID-19 and WWE does not. It's almost like it's a curse word. Like they can't mention COVID-19. And let me touch upon something bigger than that. COVID-19 is not just affecting wrestling, of course, it's affecting the whole world. It's affecting our escape from COVID-19 by affecting wrestling. But all eyes of Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL are watching what the WWE and AEW are doing to continue their show. UFC has begun having matches with empty arenas on pay-per-view, no less. So a lot of the major sporting companies are watching pro wrestling to see how they're handling this COVID-19. And I would say that has to be admirable, that they're doing these empty arena shows. They're still entertaining us, and they're doing so with a split roster, many of which are in different countries, whether it's Europe, whether it's Canada, that can't get in. So there's a lot that's at stake here. And both companies, whether you like the product or not, are at least doing, I would think, a solid job of continuing the programming through this epidemic.
True. I agree with you on that. Now, to your point, if we can go back for a minute, not to suck up with my tag team partner here, Maniac Mark, but I would like to agree with you on something and add something to it in regards to why WWE cannot mention the COVID-19 is because they've been told by Vince McMahon, don't mention it. It's like, as Jim Cornette said one time, Vince McMahon won't even sell a sneeze. He hates to sneeze, and he constantly shaves. You'll see him in the limo shaving all the time because he hates facial hair. So don't look for Mark Lindsay to ever get a job in WWE unless you shave the beard there, Mark.
Ain't happening. I got to cover my 5 chins.
But what I'm saying is, even if you take the fact that Vince doesn't want it mentioned out of the equation, the general public knows it, so you might as well mention the obvious. I mean, most people can see that I'm in a wheelchair here. They don't know why necessarily, but they can see that. So you might as well mention the obvious. But for some reason, Vince thinks of that as a negative. But this is also, Mark, since you're more of a WWE effer than I am, um, you
Not
might agree.
entirely, not entirely. I'm more
Okay.
AEW right now than anything. And NXT is I'd say AEW is 1A and NXT is 1B.
Okay.
Everyone else is a far number 2.
I can agree with you there too. Well, let me say it this way then. You said on last week's show that you started out in '85 watching Mr. T and Hulk Hogan and those guys, while I was down in Charlotte bitching about the NWA trying to kick the WWF's ass. So yeah, we come from two different standpoints that way. But what I meant was, you go back further with them than even I do in that sense. And so what I'm getting at is WWF. I have a trouble with the F part. I never got that out. Has always had a history of talking down to its audience, and they talk to you like you're a child, and they expect you to believe, even if they never mention it, that there is nothing else but the WWE universe, Mark. You know what I mean? There's no, in other words, if you drink the Kool-Aid and didn't turn on any other program, you would assume that the only wrestling promotion in the history of the country is WWE. And I think that's where they're going with this COVID-19 thing. But I think they would be better served to mention it so they can tell everybody to stay safe and things like that, the way AEW does. And it would show them more as a baby face and coming off as caring more. But when you got Vince McMahon in Michael Cole's ear and whoever else is there saying don't mention it, and obviously Michael Cole and whoever else is there can't mention it. But I think they'd be better suited if they started treating people like adults instead of children. But I just don't see them ever doing that over in WWE land.
Well, you know, Rusty, there was a time when they did treat their audience with respect and actually mention their competition on the airwaves. Rusty, we're going to head into my next topic. Was
Okay.
the Attitude Era overrated?
Yes.
I'm going to tell you that there's a large portion of the people watching this video that may be in their late 20s, early 30s who probably started watching around the Attitude Era and didn't know the 80s and early 90s of wrestling. And that's their heyday, is the Attitude Era. And I keep having to remind people that there was a lot to like about the Attitude Era, but there was also a lot to dislike. I had joked upon it last week, the Judy Bagwell on a pole match. That actually happened. David Arquette is a former WCW champion. That happened.
Yes.
Who was it? Mae Young gave birth to a hand.
Yes.
That happened.
Yes. And don't forget that Judy Bagwell is actually a former WCW Tag Team Champion
with Rick Steiner.
Come on, man.
For all the talent that was groomed and made during that time, he whose name I shall not mention, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, Diamond Dallas Page, and then you had the legends that were keeping the talent relevant: Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Randy Savage, Undertaker, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels. You had a great, I mean, it was always somewhat entertaining, but it wasn't always good. So
yeah, true. I mean, it was, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being low and 10 being high, I'd say the Attitude Era was probably a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10. The reason why I wouldn't give it higher than that is because of what you just said, all the goofiness and the excessive comedy and the Judy Bagwell on a pole and David Arquette. Actually, up until the Tessa Blanchard winning the Impact World title, which I'm assuming that Maniac Mark will put as a topic on a future show, for God's sake, because Booker T has something to say about that. We need to get the link and put that in the description of a future show. But anyway, up until the Tessa Blanchard winning the Impact title, I think maybe it's a cross between Judy Bagwell on a pole becoming a WCW tag champion, or David Arquette for two of the most worst angles in the history of wrestling. And probably the reason why the Judy Bagwell doesn't get talked about a lot is because it was WCW at a time when people were focusing a little bit more on maybe the war between the two companies rather than each individual angle, if that makes sense.
And to touch upon that, I also think it's because I would say the summer of 99, WWF just was so far better with their production and with the talent and with the matches, with the booking. The booking made so much more sense. WrestleMania that year was in Philadelphia. I was there live, and I remember it being one of the most underwhelming WrestleManias that I had ever watched. The main event, it was a one-match pay-per-view. The main event was great between Rock and Stone Cold, but right around the summer of 99, things just hit an unbelievable high, and they took off, and they never looked back. And the entire year of 2000, and I would say the first half of 2001, WWF was unstoppable. And, you know, one of the reasons I think is your next point, Rusty.
One of the things that made the Attitude Era, whether you were a WWE fan or whether you were a WCW fan back in the day, were the promos. I mean, The Rock didn't always have the greatest match, but you'd be hard pressed to find anybody of that era that could match wits with The Rock. I mean, that's how The Rock became The Rock. You know, what's your name, boy? It doesn't matter what your name is, you know, and various other things. And then Chris Jericho and Ric Flair would come out on the other channel, and if you remember correctly, and talk about WCW and Bischoff, you're a no good son of a bitch, and you know, different things of that nature. And then Arn Anderson's retirement promo, which was real
promo.
Yeah, which was real, by the way. They didn't know what they were going to say. Arn Anderson, Marty Lundy, just told Kurt Hennig, play off of me. And they just went out there and did it. So for all those people that say, well, we have to have scripted promos, no, you don't. Scripted promos didn't come along till Vince McMahon decided they needed to come along. Until then, people in the NWA, WCW, and any other wrestling promotion, including AEW today, don't have scripted promos. They just give you an idea and a time frame, and you go out there and say what you need to say. And if you can't talk, you don't get a job in the business. Just that simple. But
if you don't talk, you get a manager who can.
True. And that's why you need Rowdy Rusty, baby, as a manager. Because I got the gift of gab. I actually have a DVD. I worked for an independent promotion back in the 2002, I think it was, for a small independent promotion in North Carolina. But that's getting off topic. What I'm trying to say is some of the promos were the greatest, no matter which company you were watching. And that drove the fans in to the arenas. And the more the fans came in, the more the dirt sheets and the internet got involved about the war. And it just created a buzz time for pro wrestling that I'm not sure we're going to see again. Yes, more people might be talking about pro wrestling now than they did back then, but they're not talking about it in terms of a wrestling war quite yet. I wonder if we'll ever get back to that point. And if we do, how much longer do you think it'll take before we get AEW versus WWE on the same night? Or if you believe in this, do you think it'll be like 5 years, 3 years, or what?
I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I don't think, just looking at the numbers, the ratings alone, AEW is doing pretty well their first year. You know, a couple months into their initial contract with TNT loved the rating. They were doing over 1 million viewers, and TNT then re-upped their contract before the first year even expired. And now AEW is getting the TV rights. They're getting commercial. I forget the term for it. You were in the industry. You might be familiar with it, but TNT is now paying for the advertising, where AEW was doing that prior.
Barter, I think maybe.
Yeah. So the fact is that AEW is really, they don't have to draw 3 or 4 million. I'm sure they wouldn't turn it down, but they don't have to do 3 million viewers. Raw and SmackDown during their, forget the highlights. 3 years ago, 2 years ago, Raw was over 3 million viewers, and they haven't sniffed that number. And a lot of it could be COVID-19 related, but like you said, that trend was going down before then. So my kind of to tie this into your point about promos, right now we're at a time where there's no audience in the arenas.
Yes.
Now is the time to just let these guys loose, sink or swim. Let them do a promo on their own. And if they hit a home run, then you know that you can trust those guys with a promo going forward. And if they sink, then you work with them and you say, okay, that's not happening again. I think this is the time because the ratings are going down. And the only people who are really watching Raw, AEW, NXT, and Friday Night SmackDown are the diehards. I hate to say it, but that's us, Rusty. We're the ones that are keeping these ratings from going to zero because we're the diehard fans. We're watching. And if we don't watch, because I don't watch Raw, but I at least pay attention to it. I go on the websites. I watch the 10-minute YouTube recap. I'm at least paying attention to what's going on. Now's the time. If I read in the report on Tuesday morning that Andrade was given a live microphone to give a promo of where he's at with his stable, I would go back and watch it. I would go back and go out of my way to find that promo. And AEW, we've just kind of gotten used to that because that's how things go over there. AEW allows the wrestlers to do promos without being scripted. And I think, you said 3 or 5 years, it's not going to happen. Vince McMahon doesn't see AEW as a competition, but if they can improve themselves, then we're the winners. It doesn't have to be Vince McMahon.
True. And I think that's one of the pluses of AEW is the non-scripted promos. And a good example of that would be Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara. Both of those just played at the camera. Chris Jericho even took a camera from a cameraman a few weeks back and was playing with it and shot the cameraman on air when Chris Jericho was holding the camera, et cetera, et cetera. But on the flip side of that coin, to the promos, I know we got to wrap this up, move on to the other topics, but to wrap this up, you are told in WWE from the time you're in NXT, and I'm assuming for those that don't even go to the NXT roster, they're told this too, is that don't look at the camera. Well, if you don't look at the camera, it makes you look sterile. It makes you look like that you don't even care about the audience. And that's one of the good things that AEW is doing. I mean, even when Cody Rhodes cut one of his serious promos on Jake Roberts recently, not last week, but several weeks back, he looked in the camera and said, "Are we on?" Now, he knew they were on, but he was emphasizing the point that he wanted this to be said into the camera. So that helps draw the audience in. But there again, WWE treats their audience like children when AEW is treating their audience like adults and being more realistic. That doesn't mean I agree with everything in AEW. That just means on that one point, that's what attracts me and others to AEW over WWE.
We know, Rusty, one of my we're going to go on to our closing thoughts here, and we're going to stay with AEW. This is a very pro AEW show this week, Rusty. Good job.
Absolutely.
We're not on the payroll, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I wish we were. Can we talk?
So do I. Maybe they're handing out contracts. Maybe somebody from AEW will watch this video.
Amen. Call us Tony Khan, please.
My closing thought this week, Rusty, is basically surrounding Mike Tyson coming back to the fold. This guy, one of the baddest men on the planet, as his nickname, former world boxing champion, will be presenting the winner of the Cody Rhodes Lance Archer TNT Championship match May 23rd at Double or Nothing. And, Mike Tyson, a big wrestling fan, Mike Tyson was part of the Attitude Era that we talked about earlier. It was Vince McMahon who brought Tyson in during WrestleMania 14 as a member of DX, who later revealed he was a Stone Cold Steve Austin fan. Mike Tyson is a big deal, and I know that you want to touch upon somebody else that you would like to see in that position, but this is a major coup for AEW, not only for the name brand that is Mike Tyson, but also the fact that, and we talked about this on my other podcast, the Entrance Rant podcast. You can subscribe to that channel too. Nick brought up a great point that Mike Tyson can go on ESPN tomorrow and say, hey, I'm going to be at Double or Nothing AEW pay-per-view to give out the winner of this match the championship belt.
Sure.
And that can bring in casual or people who didn't even know about AEW to buy the pay-per-view. Mike Tyson, and he's also preparing to make a comeback, which is huge. So I want to give Nick credit for that. I'm stealing his point. But Mike Tyson is a big get for AEW.
Yes, it is. I agree with you, and I agree with Nick too. I heard that as well, that Mike Tyson will be giving the TNT championship to the winner, which I'm assuming in this case will be Cody. We'll talk about that on future shows, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But I think it should be Lance Archer, but I believe they're going with Cody on that, since Cody can, at the moment, no longer challenge, air quotes for the cerebral palsy guy, air quotes here, can no longer challenge for the AEW title. Anyway, long story short, what I'm getting at is I hope it's not just hand the belt, shake a few hands, and hi, folks, see you later kind of thing. I hope they use this belt presentation. That's another thing. You can't say belt in WWE, but you can say belt in AEW. But I hope they use this belt presentation to maybe shoot off an angle. Either Mike Tyson does some kind of angle with a heel, or Mike Tyson pretends to be babyface only to turn heel right there, and they put him with some kind of faction. Maybe put him as the I hate to use this term because it belongs to Arn Anderson, the enforcer. Maybe and this is something hard that old school Rusty here had to learn. Maybe make Mike Tyson the enforcer of the what's the Jericho faction? Help me out. Inner Circle. Yes, thank you. And keep him around, even if you just got to have him come to Dynamites, or even if you just have him come to pay-per-view. But don't just make this a one-off, because this can give, even though I don't like celebrities in wrestling because I am old school Rusty, this can give AEW the mainstream appeal that they haven't had since they started. They had it with the Rich Eisen show, with Cody being on there, and they had it other places when they first started, but AEW hasn't had that mainstream appeal with stuff outside of wrestling too much. And to your point, this can put Mike Tyson on ESPN. This could put him on the Rich Eisen show, or any of the Colin Cowherd, or any of those sports shows, which could give some more eyeballs focusing over to AEW, because people got to remember, even though AEW has got some money behind it, it's still only a year old. So there's no way in the world you can expect AEW to even come close to having the brand loyalty that WWE has. So if Mike Tyson is used correctly, and this is not just a one-off hand the belt to the winner type thing, Mike Tyson could pay dividends for AEW, not only that night, but going down the road.
Well, I agree 100%. But I also think in the event that it is a one-off, I still think this is a big get for AEW and a big win.
Sure, no doubt. It is a big win. I'm just hoping that they maximize it instead of doing what we said earlier in the show, which is doing these short angles and then forgetting about it 2 or 3 weeks later. I mean, if it is a one-off, it'll be a big win for 2 or 3 weeks for AEW, and then everybody else will go start talking about WWE again, So I'm hoping that they get some really big mileage out of this rather than just a one-shot deal. Basically, my closing thought for the show here, Mark, would be there's a rumor going out there on the internet that I didn't really pay much attention to earlier in the week, but as I was doing research for the Breakout show, it started to pick up some traction, and that's Steve Borden, Sting, coming into AEW. And the reason why I didn't pay much attention to it is because Sting had been injured when he came over to WWE and was not able to wrestle after the injury. But then he went to the WWE Hall of Fame and said, "This is not goodbye. I'll see you later. It's not goodbye. I'll see you later." So I assumed he would end up in WWE if he came back at all. But they officially released him this week, which was another bonehead move by Vince McMahon and Kevin Dunn and all those other brain trust over there at the Titan Tower. But what I'm getting at is the reason it picked up some traction is because Sting was supposed to be part of a Legends video game with the Mattel toy company. And Mattel put out a statement that said Sting has requested his release from the video game. Now, even though nobody's told me this, it stands to reason that AEW would want Sting to get out of the video contract because not the video contract, but the video game contract, so that they could put maybe Sting in a video game that they're producing right now. And there continues to be podcasts and videos about Sting coming to AEW. And then when Cody Rhodes did, I don't know if you can see this from my camera, but did this sort of Hulk Hogan type I'm listening type scenario that Cody Rhodes did on YouTube, or Twitter, actually, I think it was, but it made its way over to YouTube as well. Then that said to me, wait a minute, there's some credence here. And if they can get Sting and then have the Revolt, which used to be WWE's Revival, if you can get both of those maybe coming in either before or after or shortly thereafter this COVID-19 thing is over and you get fans back in the arena, Mark, what type of pop, for lack of a better term, you think AEW would get if all of a sudden you've got 15 or so thousand people in an arena anywhere in this country that's sold out, then all of a sudden Sting finally comes out? That's got to get.
I think we're a couple years away from having 15,000 people in the stands again. I really think this COVID-19 thing is a year or more away from being somewhat resolved. But to answer your question, I would love Sting to get one last huge pop. Sting was one of the only faces I ever cheered for in the NWA. I was always a Midnight Express fan, Beautiful Bobby and Sweet Stan. Everyone liked the Road Warriors. And I always, for some reason, I always liked the Varsity Club. But Sting was the one face that I cheered his entire run. And I am a big Sting fan, and I would love for him to get one more shot at glory and one more shot at a big pop.
I agree with you. I don't think that WWE did him any favors while he was there. Sure, his injury cut that short, but even if he had not had an injury, I don't think WWE was going to do him right, because WWE has always had a history of, yes, they will steal you from other promotions to get you from other promotions, but if you're not a homegrown talent that WWE or Vince creates, then they don't have as much use for you. So I think that Sting needs to go back to go to AEW, because not just because WWE didn't use him right, but also because AEW has more of that WCW feel. And besides Ric Flair, who means more to wrestling on TNT, for God's sake, than Sting?
Rusty, that's a great point and a great way to end our show.
That's because I'm great, Mark. I'm great. That's why.
Well, look, Rusty said it all. I'd love to see Sting back somewhere, somehow. But I would just like wrestling to be back. the way it should be. And unfortunately, I think we're a long ways away from that. We thank you all for joining us here on Point Counterpoint. I am Mark. That is Rowdy Rusty. And we'll see you next week here on Point Counterpoint. Goodbye, everybody.
Take care, guys.
The proceeding was brought to you by GotMark76 in association with That Way Cool Wrestling Show. Please subscribe to GotMark76 and That Way Cool Wrestling Show on YouTube. And until next time, we'll see you at the matches.
I'm a fan of sports entertainment. Oh, no.